We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys. I'm back and I bring to you the part 8 of What If Naruto Gained Unwanted Immortality. The fourth Shinobi War has ended with the sealing of Kaguya and the Juubi in Naruto. As the years pass and his unwanted immortality becomes clear, what will Naruto do when everyone he once fought for returns to dust as the world about him changes? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 51, I am. Around 50 miles away from their destination, the clone, who was snoozing while nestled in between the spikes running down Saphira's back, snapped his eyes open when he heard the harsh sounds of grinding metal and stomps of steel-tipped boots. I see you finally decided to join us back in the land of the living. Eragon called out when he felt the clone shift its weight. I felt that we were close to the Varden encampment. That scrying technique really is quite useful when communicating over large distances, yelled back the clone over the shriek of the wind as he remembered how Ajihad had scryed Eragon several days ago. Flashback. It was the second day after leaving the deserted island of the Dragon Riders when Eragon, who was flying on top of Saphira along with the Naruto clone, felt the small mirror he always kept on him heat up. Pulling out the mirror from a pocket, Eragon brought it up to eye level and to his surprise saw the face of the leader of the Varden, Ajihad. Greetings Eragon Shadeslayer, I have been trying to contact you for days and only now have been able to with the help of the elven spellcasters Queen Islanzati sent us 1 week ago. Now give me an update of your situation and when you will be back. Ajihad, I have made great gains in strength, both physically and magically, and have discovered a startling secret that I cannot and will not say as of now. We will have more words about this later, in person. Currently, we have just passed over the spine and are making our way to Serta to meet up with you, responded Eragon, noting how the black leader seemed to relax at his words. Any increases in your strength can only benefit our cause. I only hope that it did not come with too high a price, at least from what Blodgarm told me, your progress was rather sudden. As for this secret, I will not force you to tell me as I trust your judgment in this. Eragon nodded his thanks as Ajihad continued, as for Serta, instead make your way to Feinster, for that is where the next battle will be. If you must resupply, you can stop by Aruf's. Jormunder took the city earlier this week and is en route back to us. Will do Ajihad, I predict that if all goes well and nothing stops us, we should be there by the end of this week. Good, then prepare to fight the day after you arrive. This will be a siege battle, which is completely different to what you have faced before. Understood, if that is all, then see you on the battlefield Ajihad. Eragon said as he ended the spell, watching as the mirror he held faded back to black. Flashback end. At the speed we're going, we should be at the camp within the hour, so you should probably call out Naruto now so he doesn't startle the soldiers. Eragon informed the clone as he used his chakra to stick to Saphira, having finally learned the secret behind Naruto's seemingly glued body, while checking and double-checking his sword, wards, and most of all jewels, with the last item already refilled by the clone. Surprise my ass. I wouldn't be surprised if even some of those elves died of a heart attack from what they're about to see, muttered the clone as he dispelled, although not before he heard a chuckle from Eragon and a rumbling laugh from Saphira who had been listening in. An instant later, Arya, Naruto, and his dragon whirled into existence beside the flying duo. Startled at the height they were at, the metallic dragon desperately flapped his wings as he did his best to avoid plummeting to his maybe death, along with his 2 passengers. Although he was sure nothing would happen to either of them since Naruto was well, Naruto. Meanwhile, Eragon and Saphira stared at the dragon that popped into existence beside them, astounded by the sudden increase in the dragon's length and size. It's been hardly a week, and he has already grown to the size Saphira was. What a monster, thought Eragon, although Saphira, who was also surprised at the growth rate of her fellow dragon, felt something more than just that when she looked at the younger dragon. Only a week and yet the hatchling is already my size if Naruto hadn't transformed me. If he keeps this up, he might actually be the same size as me within the year or so. Impressive. Saphira thought as she glanced over the younger dragon, taking in how instead of scales, he seemed to mostly have thick metal plates that frankly intimidated her. She would definitely not want to ram into him, especially with those sharp spikes. As Naruto and Arya made themselves comfortable behind the 2 horns that flared back at the base of the dragon's head, The new rider realized that despite training him for 2 weeks, he has never actually ridden on his dragon. Rubbing the area in front of him where metal armor met with dragon scales, Naruto reached out through the mental bond the two shared. Hey, I know that with everything going on that we've been busy training you so that you would be able to protect yourself, but I just realized that this is our first flight together as dragon and rider. Rubbing the back of his head, Naruto continued as he watched his dragon tilt his head towards them. From what Eragon and Saphira told me, the first flight between rider and dragon is what truly bonds the two together and creates a connection like none other. And so I'm sorry for not even bothering to ask for a flight. Don't worry Naruto, I know that we've been busy with my training and I am beyond thankful that you have done so. So there is nothing you need to apologize for. The dragon shook his head, knowing that his rider meant every word. However, if you're really that sorry, we could have some fun with this one, after all it's our first. Hearing this, Naruto looked into the burning eyes of his dragon and widely grinned when he saw his own smile mirrored on his dragon's face, although the way the heavy, metal lower jaw seemed to twist was a little odd. Arya, who did not hear the little conversation, was startled when the dragon they were riding suddenly accelerated forwards. Reflexively applying chakra to her legs, she leaned forward as she wrapped her arms around Naruto's midsection and clung on for dear life as the dragon underneath her suddenly flew sharply upwards. Tightly holding onto the hands that had suddenly wrapped around his stomach, Naruto leaned back as he kissed the smooth forehead of Arya, completely unconcerned that if he stopped chakra circulation to his legs, he would fall from the height of over a kilometer, if he didn't already know how to fly. It'll be fine, Aryaheim. Just open your eyes and look, it's quite the view. And so she did, just as the dragon started corkscrewing through the air. That was a mistake. As Naruto was laughing in excitement, he suddenly choked and the arms around his chest suddenly squeezed the air out of them. Naruto, started Arya as she smiled sweetly, a little too sweetly for it to be genuine, at a now sweating Naruto. Could you please tell your dragon to stop rolling around in the air like a dog does in the mud? Knowing exactly what that smile meant, Naruto lamented how all women seemed to know that particular smile as well as the puppy eyes no jutsu. It just wasn't fair, especially when their effectiveness increased by 100 times when used by Arya. Yes dear. Naruto immediately said as he sent a mental command to his dragon, telling him no more rolling around, at least when Arya was with them. Understanding that despite his rider being all-powerful, in the end his mate was somehow able to intimidate him out of certain actions and decisions, such as suggesting Arya to go through the same training as him. That didn't go well at all with Arya. That was the day the baby dragon realized it didn't matter how powerful you were, your loved ones were the ones who held you by the balls, and Naruto wasn't an exception. So instead of rolling around in the air, the dragon settled for performing barrel rolls that sometimes almost touched the clouds for a few minutes before hovering just below them. At first confused as to why his dragon stopped, Naruto stopped when he was suddenly pulled into the dragon's mind. When he was about to ask the reason, the newest dragon rider when he realized he was looking through his dragon's eyes at a view that few in the world ever got to see. And what a view it was! With his dragon's enhanced fiery eyes, Naruto could see the details of the land for hundreds of miles, sharp and clear as if they were but a few feet away. The majestic outlines of the mountains and their scintillating snowy caps. The harsh yet still beautiful brown and yellow sand of the desert as a sandstorm kicked up, hiding parts of the land behind a veil of sand. The deep blue almost purple depths of the lakes and the lighter blue of the clear running rivers and streams that seemed to want to drown him. The deep green of the forests and grass of the plains that still dripped with the morning dew and reminded him of the eyes of his lover sitting right behind him. And finally, the seemingly endless blue sky dotted with white fluffs of clouds, and if he looked hard enough, the brilliant stars that hid themselves from view during the day. Then he noticed that red, orange, and yellow hues were far more vibrant and alive while the other colors were more subdued and muted. It didn't detract from the stunning view at all, if anything, it seemed to enhance it, as if by coloring in tiny imperfections the view as a whole became all the more real and alive. Is this what you see all the time? Whispered Naruto when he felt a chuckle rumble underneath him. Technically no, as this is the first time I have ever flown so high and in the real world. That is actually why I had to stop. For thousands of years, the only color I have known was the black of darkness. That was until you. With this the dragon turned to Naruto as he dipped his head. But the blonde knew just how much that small movement meant considering the extreme pride the dragons held for their kind. In all of my years, I have never once had an inkling of desire to hatch for anyone, and once Galbatorix destroyed the order, I had lost hope that I would ever see the light. You were like the sun that drove off the darkness. You gave me back the hope that I would see the same sights that my ancestors did millennia ago. You gave me warmth when all I could feel was the cold grip of despair. There are no words, not even in the ancient language, that could express my gratitude for bringing us to the world, even though they haven't hatched yet. I know they will feel the same. And so I make a promise with you, Naruto Uzumaki, last god of shinobi, my claws will tear apart your foes, my teeth will devour them, my wings will blast them apart, my armor shall be your sanctuary, and my eternal flames will incinerate all obstacles. And should there be a time when the world betrays you, I shall crush the land and its people to dust if you but ask it of me. This, I swear to you in the name of the greatest of dragons, Rogmar the Dread, last leader of the wild dragons of Alagizia, whose wings covered all of Du Weldenbarden in shadow. Minutes passed by as Naruto stayed silent, with no one disturbing that silence as Arya picked up that something momentous had happened between the two and stayed still as a rock. Finally, he broke it as he spoke in his original tongue. I accept your oath, eldest of Rogmar the Dread, and in return, I shall name you, Naruto solemnly said as even the wind over a kilometer up seemed to still. From now on, you are Azura, named after the Rinnegan path you have inherited and according to another religion, a being that can fight the gods. Azura, the dragon, now named Azura, rolled the name around in his mind as felt the power and meaning behind it. My name, my name, my name, my name. Finally, the young dragon could no longer hold it in as he roared out a plume red-orange flames tinged with black that near the consistency of lava while bellowing out his name to the world. My name is Azura, eldest of Rogmar the Dread, and dragon of Naruto Uzumaki, last god of shinobi. Miles away, the 12 elven spellcasters that Queen Islanzadi had sent to aid the Varden were meditating when a might roar that made the air itself tremble ripped through the camp. Instantly snapping their heads to the northwest, their faces paled when they realized that the roar could have only belonged to one race in Alagizia. A dragon. And that dragon did not sound at all like the one they heard from Saphira Brightscales. No, this one was more guttural, more primitive, as if from the time when dragons were still wild and beholden to no one but themselves and their leader. They had no idea at the time how right they were. Their eldest and most powerful spellcaster, Blodgarm, immediately called out to the others as they sprinted from the tent they were stationed in to the outside perimeter, in a matter of seconds. Speaking out in the ancient language, a barrier made of pure energy formed as they gathered thoughts together as they prepared for a mental war with the enemy rider. Scanning the horizon, Blodgarm narrowed his keen cat-like yellow eyes as he searched for the enemy, only to arch a blue eyebrow when he saw the familiar gleaming sapphire scales of Saphira as well as the young human Eragon. Curiously, when he reached his mind towards him in order to communicate, he felt the presence of multiple voices, which he never felt before in his centuries of life. Lawfen, Worden, continue the barrier, Eragon Shadeslayer and Saphira Brightscales are only around 20 miles away. Everyone else, prepare for battle. Seeing the elves nod, the blue-haired elf furrowed his eyebrows in confusion. However, there is still no sign of the other dragon. Just where could he be? Several minutes passed before a great hulking black armored beast dropped from the clouds next to Alagizia's only free dragon rider and dragon. Although the dragon was only about half as large as Saphira, the blue elf admitted that the new dragon looked far more terrifying, with its black armored spikes and the eerie red glow down its chest. Knowing that there would be wards against projectiles, Blodgarm and the rest of the elves focused their magic into a mighty mental spear that glowed a pale green, one capable of ripping through any wards, any mental shields. If the rider and dragon were a normal pair. With a single word, the 12 elves flung the mental spear with deadly accuracy, targeting the new dragon. As the spear flew into motion, they watched in anticipation, waiting for the beast to fall and with it, another potential threat to the Varden. However, their eyes widened when their superhuman sight spotted a certain blonde and princess riding behind the dragon's head. It cannot be, started Blodgarm as he squinted his eyes to better focus on the two. Barzel. Why is Naruto Finirol and Aryasvit Kona riding on the enemy dragon? Could they have been captured? But then how could Naruto Finirol of all people be captured unless? His cat eyes widened dramatically when his quick elven mind came to a startling conclusion, one that gave him immense joy before shoving him into a pit of horror. Unless, one of them is the dragon rider and they somehow either retrieved the last egg, or found another one. If they found one, then surely there must be more and the race of dragons is not finished. His words were clearly heard by those and the excitement they felt were clearly visible on their faces. However, we also just launched our most powerful mental attack that will be soon arriving in less than a minute. We can only hope that Naruto Finieral's vast powers will allow him brush off our attack. The other elves just looked to their leader in horror of what they had just done. They just potentially crippled or outright killed one of the 2 free dragons of Allegezia, and more importantly Arya and Naruto. And if either Arya or Azura were harmed, Naruto was going to be pissed. Oi, Eragon, I finally named my dragon. His name is... Naruto started before Eragon waved a hand. Yes, we know Naruto. His name is Azura. I'm not sure if anyone within a 30-mile radius doesn't know his name by now. Maybe Azura should roar out again and let everyone in Fainster, the city we're about to invade, know that there's another dragon rider. Interrupted Eragon as he chided the immortal on potentially giving away the element of surprise. Both man and dragon sheepishly chuckled as Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Sorry about that, we had quite the intense moment there and this baby, Azura playfully growled when Naruto tapped his horns, couldn't keep his excitement down. Not that I blame him. It's much better to be emotional and passionate than cold and unemotional in my books. Somewhere, nestled on the shore of a pool of lava, a certain ice-colored egg trembled as the baby inside it sneezed. Naruto then felt a rather hard pinch on the side of his waist that he actually felt slight pain from. Impressive considering that even though the circulation of chakra was forced to a minimum, his skin and muscle retained the flexibility of flesh and the toughness of steel. Turning around, Naruto was confronted with dark green emerald orbs with a ring of amber and gold surrounding the pupils as the owner of said eyes tilted her head. Are you saying that you do not actually love me? Unlike what most others think, I know I can come off as cold and unemotional. Naruto simply chuckled when he heard his lover's words. Arya-Heim, from what I've seen, you are anything but cold or unemotional when you're with me. Especially that last kiss we shared before exited my Kamui. The blonde smirked when he saw the light honey cheeks, but suddenly frowned when he felt a chakra signature heading their way. Noticing her love's change in expression, Arya's eyes sharpened as her blush quickly faded away, her muscles tensing for whatever caused the change in expression. Leaning to the right, she looked around Naruto in time to see a glowing ethereal spear hurtling towards them, specifically Azura. Sharply inhaling, Arya recognized the spell as one used by the elves, a highly advanced technique that directly targeted the mind while ignoring all wards against physical dangers. Its drilling attribute only made it deadlier as the mental barriers most commonly used were walls built to withstand blunt impact or sharp cuts, not a piercing drill attack that could force its way through. The only downside to the technique was that it required multiple fully trained elven spellcasters in order to use such an ability from such a range and with this much power. Naruto, will the wards you placed on me hold up against this attack? Azura called out to his rider as his self-preservation instincts screamed at him to dodge to the side. His eyes already switched to the Rinne Sharingan. Naruto noted the words that made up the spell and could only sigh in admiration at the work of art the attack was, even if it was too weak to do any damage as long he was there. No Azura, while my wards around you could allow you to brush off a mountain if it fell on you, they are purely against physical attacks. I still haven't placed mental wards for you yet as I myself am still studying the art of the mind. Instead of panicking at his rider's words, Azura merely cocked his head to the side, knowing that his rider would never let fatal harm come to him. "Na Arya," Naruto called out as Arya flickered her gaze away from the incoming magical missile to Naruto. "Remember back in Doru Ariba you wanted to know more about these eyes?" Seeing her nod, the blonde immortal let out a wide grin. "Well, you're about to find out." Before either could say anything, Naruto jumped off Azura as he flew in front of them and directly in the path of the spell. Although they too knew that nothing would happen to the overpowered Hokage, they still couldn't help but slightly worry on the off chance something went wrong. Maybe a whole Jonin's and well on the way to a full Kage's worth of chakra. Remarkable that the form remained intact over such a distance. Maybe if I incorporate parts of the spell into my Rasengan variations, I could throw them further than before. Food for thought. Well, for now. With a single motion, Naruto raised his right hand, palms out towards the incoming projectile as one of the circles on his eyes pulsed. Just what is the boy doing? He needs to get out of the way, now. Every elf down below thought as they watched with growing fear and fascination. What happened next shocked everyone present, although to a lesser degree the ones closest to Naruto. They watched as the spiraling spear of mental destruction came into contact with the outstretched hand. But instead of simply phasing through, the energy seemed to distort, as if its very essence was being unraveled before it just seemed to melt into the hand. And the sheer speed that all of this happened, it only took at most a second for the spell to be rendered harmless and completely absorbed. When all was said and done, no trace of one of the most destructive spells in the elves' arsenal remained. All that remained was a smirking Naruto who now crossed his arms, his mystical eyes fixed onto the distant group of elves. For the first time in their centuries-long lives, the 12 elven spellcasters had their jaws dropped to the ground. The only thought in their heads was, impossible. The group traveling with Naruto gawked at the display for only a moment before schooling their faces into neutral ones. Once Naruto mounted behind Azura's head again, the two dragons, one a scintillating blue and the other a menacing black, continued their way forward, this time at a mile-eating pace so as to avoid more possible attacks. Just what was that, Naruto? You said it was related to those eyes of yours, could it possibly be energy absorption? Arya asked as she drew her conclusions from what she saw. The others leaned as the Eldenari took a break from stuffing knowledge into poor Eragon's head. Once again turning, Naruto smiled as he noted how easily the elf figured out what happened. That would be correct, Arya. The power you saw before is called the Preta Path of the Rinnegan, one of 6 available to me. Any technique, no matter how simple or complicated, will have its energy absorbed when they make contact with me as long this path is active. Arya's eyes grew large at the words as she immediately drew up dozens of possible applications for such a power. Naruto, this power by itself is amazing. Any magic, mental or otherwise, would be useless against you, as even attacking with your mind requires using chakra from the first gate. But that energy has to go somewhere, and is the energy you are able to absorb only limited to chakra? And must you make contact with the spell in order to absorb it? By this time, they were but a few miles from the encampment as Naruto furrowed his brow, mainly at the second half of the question. The chakra absorbed becomes a part of me, allowing me to use it however I see fit. However, I am unsure of whether it's only chakra that can be absorbed or if I even need to touch it. I never tried and never found a reason to. It's something to test another day. With that, the group rode in silence until they finally reached the edge of the camp where the elves were. With several ground-trembling thumps, the 2 dragons landed as their passengers dismounted, jumping to the ground as the elven spellcasters swiftly made their way towards them, closely followed by Ajihad and the rest of the command chain of the Varden, who had by then caught up to the elves. Eragon, I'm glad that you are back in time for our first major battle since the Burning Plains. Ajihad greeted as the two stopped a few paces from each other. Glancing towards the other human in the group, the leader of the Varden looked with great interest at the dragon standing protectively by the blonde's side. I am too, Ajihad, it's good to finally be back. It feels as if it's been years since the last I've been amongst the Varden. So how is the war coming? The war is going well. Although the going has been slower without you here, your training to defeat and kill Galbatorix and his infernal dragon before this battle was of the utmost priority. However, now we cannot afford you to go training for long periods of time. The coming battles will be one after the other and we can expect heavy resistance each step of the way. I just hope the training you did was enough. Having expected this as they were flying to the Varden, Eragon nodded his understanding and agreement as he felt a confidence not only in his comrades, but for the first time in the fight, in himself. Finally coming to the new dragon, Ajihad asked with a barely concealed excitement. I remember you saying that there was a certain secret that you couldn't say during our conversation. Am I correct in saying that the dragon by Naruto's side part of that secret? Eragon slowly nodded, trying to keep his face set as he had an internal argument with the Eldenari. Seeing the rider's expression, Ajihad kept quiet, figuring that Eragon was mentally communicating with Saphira on something. Yumarathelda, I must ask for your counsel on an important matter. Continue Eragon Finiral, although I already have a feeling of what you want to ask. Mentally nodding, Eragon called to attention several images of Ajihad, Queen Islanzadi, Oromiz, and Glaedr. I am thinking of possibly telling these people and dragon about the secret of the Eldenari and of the last eggs. They have a right to know, especially Oromizelda and Glaedrelda. However, this secret is not only mine to tell, you have been the guardian for all of these years. It is only proper I ask you as well. Contrary to what Eragon expected, the Eldenari almost immediately responded. During the journey back, we have been sifting through your memories and were saddened when we saw Oromiz and Glaedr crippled. They were the first to see through Galbatorix's deceptions and the Forsworn, if only we had listened to his counsel. It gladdens our heart of hearts to see them restored back to their full strength, again something we owe Naruto Finiero. You are right about sharing the secret, they do deserve to know. However, tell the Queen Islanzati and Ajihad only about us, the Eldenari, say nothing about the eggs. Only tell them after the war is over. As for Oromiz and Glade, when we meet, we will remove the spell that forced them to forget about our existence. Thank you Yumura Thelda. Returning his full attention to Ajihad, Eragon swiftly muttered, Atra nosu ways vardo fra eld hornia. Knowing the spell, Ajihad's eyes grew serious, for such a secret to warrant such caution, it must be great indeed. Ajihad, you must swear to me in the ancient language that what I say stays between us and none other, not even the elves standing outside. After seeing Ajihad nod and swear, Eragon continued. After the Battle of the Burning Plains, we found out that the source behind the king's strength is actually Eldenari, or the heart of hearts of dragons that contain the same amount of energy as the dragon when alive. That is the reason why Galbatorix seems to never run out of power despite his fantastic feats. Seeing Ajihad start to frown, Eragon knew that the Varden leader grasped the hidden details. I see that you understand. No Eldenari would ever serve the traitor that ended the order. And so for over a century, Galbatorix has mentally broken hundreds if not thousands of Eldenari, forcing them to supply his spells and enhance his physical abilities to supernatural levels, even beyond the elves. Now the Black Leader was not even bothering to hide his displeasure. For years, the Varden and the elves hypothesized just how Galbatorix could be so powerful, but they never expected the use of the Eldenari. But it would explain much of the mysteries surrounding the greatest traitor of Alagaezia. However, on Doru Ariba, in a place hidden away from history itself, we found over 100 Eldenari, who agreed to help us and have been teaching me the knowledge they had gathered during their existence. But there was one more thing, a single egg that hatched for Naruto. Ajihad's eyes widened at the news. If this was true, then they finally had a chance of truly freeing Alagaezia. From Naruto's actions, he knew that the blonde foreigner tried to stay away from getting too involved in the war, and while he did participate in the battles, he never tried to truly end them, just doing enough to ensure them victory without the loss of too many men. But with this, Eragon was now significantly stronger and there was even a small chance that Naruto, who was now a dragon rider, would play a greater role in the war, although he didn't hold too much hope for it. But he had to know for sure. Eragon, will Naruto devote more of his energy into this fight? It is painfully obvious to me that despite his spectacular feats, that he has been greatly holding back in the last two battles. With him being a rider, he is no longer merely a foreigner, but somebody that has stronger ties to this continent than most. Oh, he definitely has strong ties to Alagaezia, even without Azura, muttered Eragon under his breath, clearly remembering the intimacies between Naruto and Arya as Ajihad looked slightly befuddled at the young rider. Realizing that he hadn't actually answered the question, Eragon snapped back up as he answered. It is unlikely that Naruto will use more power than he already has in our struggles against the Empire. When he was offered the egg, he made a deal with the Eldenari that before Galbatorix dies, he would give them the knowledge the Mad King has. I can understand from where he is coming from, this is not his fight and I have a feeling that soon after the war is over, he will leave and may never return. Disappointed at the not entirely unexpected response, Ajihad sighed as some of his more ambitious plans died before even reaching the drawing board. So be it. If that is all, we must update you on the current state of the war. Nodding, Eragon spoke a few words as he cancelled the sound barrier around them. Turning towards the others, the rider shot them a look that they understood as he and Saphira proceeded to follow Ajihad, along with the rest of the accompanying Varden who were still staring at the new dragon. Chapter 52, Battle on Two Fronts. As soon as Eragon and Saphira walked off with the Varden contingent, Naruto, Arya, and Azura were almost immediately surrounded by the elven spellcasters who all had distraught expressions on their faces. Naruto Finiero, Arya Svitkona, are you and the dragon unharmed? Asked Blodgarm as he glanced over the trio, looking for any signs of injury or mental damage. Sighing in relief at finding none, Blodgarm tilted his head downwards in a show of rare humility for an elf. It was a horrifying crime to murder a fellow elf, whether it be intentionally or unintentionally, and only grew worse when the victim was the daughter of the current queen of the elves. On behalf of the others, I want to apologize for attacking you with one of the strongest spells we have. If anything had happened to you or your dragon, Queen Islanzati and Oromi Zelda would have had our heads. Although just how exactly did you negate our spell if I may ask? Blodgarm apologized before asking the question each of the elves had in their mind. Seeing that they were unlikely to budge on this, Naruto weakly glared at Arya. I guess I know where your insatiable curiosity comes from. Arching an eyebrow, Arya tapped her chin as she pointed out, Naruto, you do realize that most people would have questions that they want answered when they see their most powerful spell or ability get utterly negated with barely a move. At his lover's remark, Naruto rolled his eyes as huffed out, unable to come up with a suitable comeback. Meanwhile, the surrounding elves just stared, almost unable to believe that their ice princess was actually joking around with the immortal human. As for your question, Naruto whirled back to face the others, snapping them out of their brief daze. The short answer is that I absorbed it. As for how, that's my secret to tell. While not exactly what they wished to hear, Blodgarm and the others accepted it. It wouldn't be the first time the specifics of a spell were hidden from others. Nevertheless, we're glad that none of you were harmed. Peeking over Naruto's shoulder, Blodgarm performed the elven sign of greeting towards Azura, touching his lips and then twisting his right hand over his sternum, although the black dragon looked quite lost, having not been taught anything about elven greetings. Seeing the dragon's confusion, Blodgarm quickly realized the problem as he explained what he did. Dragon, the motion I did earlier was the elvish way of greeting others. I am sorry for causing the confusion. Puffing out a small cloud of smoke, Azura merely blinked in response as he waited for the weird furry blue elf to continue. The leader of the elves quickly realized that the metal-plated dragon was waiting for him and promptly asked, "What is your name, dragon? And just who is your rider?" Looking over his shoulder, Naruto couldn't resist as he poked fun at Azura. Well, it would seem your whittle roar wasn't enough. How about you try again, except put some effort into it. A very large tick mark developed as Azura glared daggers at the sometimes insufferable blonde. Although he deeply respected his rider, both because of his past and sheer power, he quickly realized that despite being a century old and once being the Hokage, the blonde still acted childishly once in a while and loved to tease his friends and people close to him. Intent on having his petty revenge, Azura acted quickly as he exhaled a small but concentrated stream air, causing Naruto to almost fall flat on his face if not for his instinctive use of chakra to stick to the ground. Now instead of his face full of mud, Naruto was instead put into an awkward position as his face was level with the knees of Blodgarm. Laughter exploded in Naruto's mind as the Juubi, who had long since retreated back into the seal to take a nap, rolled around in the mindscape, highly amused that a shinobi of his friend's caliber was actually almost blown off his feet by somebody barely 2 weeks old. Hey fuzzball, stop laughing. It wasn't even that funny and it's not like it's my fault that I let down most of my guard down around my friends. This only made the ancient fox cackle harder as finally, Naruto gave up and settled for mentally pouting at the giant fox while tensing his leg muscles to lift himself off the ground. He was soon greeted to the mirthful chuckling and humming of the elves as they watched the display with amused eyes. Snorting with pride, Azura hummed along before saying out loud, to the shock of those who didn't know him or the new Saphira. As you can see here, Naruto is my rider and has named me Azura, named after the beings that according to a religion back across the sea were able to fight against the gods themselves. A most worthy name, said Azura in a prideful tone as the elves, for what seemed the 10th time in that many minutes, looked in astonishment at the blonde. How could they not? The very idea that a dragon would choose a foreigner, who although was admittedly extremely powerful, over the princess of the race that first bonded with them was in their minds quite ridiculous. But before any of them could question, they were transfixed by a ringed glare, courtesy of Azura as he contemptuously glowered at the 12, already knowing what were their thoughts on his decision. I can see the question in your eyes, even if you don't ask. Who I choose to be my rider is none of your business, elf. And considering that despite there being hundreds of elven riders and their dragons during the fall of Doruariba, your kind, the supposedly most powerful race of all of Alagaezia, was not even able to take down one traitor and his merry band. What right do you have when you couldn't even save my race from near extinction? Growled out Azura as he enjoyed watching the elves pale in both anger and shame. On the side, Naruto and Arya kept quiet as they allowed the youngest dragon vent his sorrow and rage, having known how hurt he was even though he never showed it. Naruto gently patted Azura's nose as he mentally assured him that everything was alright as Arya leaned against the side of his broad neck, thus far the only elf he allowed to be so close to him. Several awkward moments passed before Naruto clapped his hands, instantly disrupting the tense atmosphere. Well, I think we all had enough of the greetings. How about we go to a more private place as you update us on how the war is going and the current plans to take Feinster? Grateful for the interruption, the elves quickly nodded as they ushered the trio to the large tent they were meditating in as they updated them of the situation. Queen Islanzadi led our race and successfully captured Sunan 1 week ago and have been marching on Gilead. Oromi Zelda and Gladerelda were to meet with the queen and the army yesterday before razing the city that kept you imprisoned and tortured to the ground until only ashes remained. The attack is scheduled the day before our own battle. As for Feinster, while the two free dragon rider pairs and Arya arrived at the Varden, a tall dark figure stood on the ramparts, looking out onto the plains that surrounded the city as he waited for an imminent attack. When the clouds that obscured the moon dispersed, the details of the man stood out in stark relief to the silvery light that bathed the area. Pitch black hair, black gloves and a heavy cape that covered a dark crimson armor lined with script in the ancient language. The man looked out with solid black whirlpools for eyes as he turned back, looking with well-hidden disdain for the similarly crimson-clad soldiers as they rushed to and fro, preparing for the worst assault of their lives. Vermin, all of them. Weak beings that can't help but kneel before a greater power than them. So easily manipulated and lied to. Still, they do have their uses, mused the man as a soldier, decked out with a golden helmet and inlays in his cape, ran up to him and hurriedly kneeled, taking off his helmet and not daring to look up from the ground. My king, the scouts have reported the presence of 10,000 elves on the move. They will be here within the week. The soldier continued to kneel as the now revealed Galbatorix, king of the Allegezia, traitor of the Dragon Rider Order, and slayer of Vrael, strongest of the riders, clasped his hands behind his back, turning as he inwardly sneered. Elves, so arrogant just because of their physical and magical gifts. Fools. Galbatorix scoffed as he ordered the general to continue preparing. Once the kneeling soldier left, the Mad King pivoted back as he continued his inner rambling. With their power and knowledge, they could have helped the Dragon Rider Order conquer and unite the continent under one banner, bringing peace and eliminating those Urgal abominations. For a second, the air around him seemed to twist under his rage as he thought back to his first dragon, Jarnanvosk, before she was killed by a stray arrow to the heart. The fact that he didn't know at the time the correct words to save her drove Galbatorix deeper into his fury as his body trembled with repressed madness. If only I had known the words sooner. If only those thrice-damned fools shared their knowledge when I first started to learn the ancient language, none of this would have happened. Jarnanvosk would still be alive and the Urgal species would have become extinct. With a breathing exercise, Galbatorix slowly calmed his rage as he tapped the floor beneath him. The ground trembled as a muted black foot lined with claws as large as small houses gripped it. The rampart, or better known as Shruken's nose, grew a pair of glowing orb the color of glaciers and the size of a man opened as it balefully looked up at the human that killed his rider and forced a bond between them. Although he was quite insane, he still remembered that instant in time when Galbatorix, along with his helper Morzin, thrust their blades through his chosen rider's heart. But he could do nothing as his mental defenses were broken long ago and every thought and action of his were under his control. However, somewhere deep within his mind, secluded from the dementia, in a corner was what was left of the hopeful dragon that was loyal to his chosen one. For a century, he watched as the traitor performed massacres and tragedies, whether they be by his hand or orders. And the worst part was that he too participated in the killings of his own kin. At that point, he shut himself off, escaped and reinforced the only bright corner left of his shadowed mind as he secluded himself from the world. But should he be given the smallest, the tiniest opening, he would end himself and if possible devour the traitor and send him to the depths of hell if there was one. For now, however, his body was used as a glorified platform as Galbatorix continued to survey the land, waiting for the elves to come so that he could personally crush them while taunting them of their failures as the light left their eyes. He wouldn't have left Urbane if it weren't for this mysterious stranger, Naruto, that had showed such power before his connection to the puppet rider broke off and the powerful ripple of energy that effortlessly broke through his countless wards, one even made up by a certain word. After the destruction of the elves, Naruto was next. Over a week has passed from when the group landed and joined the Varden. During that time, Naruto didn't hesitate to drill Arya to the ground in the use of the Kawarimi until she didn't need to use any seals at all. Although the fact that she had gotten substantially slower with the use of 10x resistance seals to the point that every action felt like as if she were moving in quicksand, may have been the main reason why she broke through the last boundary after being showered in, thankfully blunted, weaponry. Azura had undergone a smaller transformation, but his total length reached an impressive 50 feet. While only a little greater than half of Saphira's size, it was still impressive considering that he was only 3 weeks old. Most other young dragons would only be the size of a large dog and don't even think of flying, they could barely run with their stubby legs. Unfortunately, the same could not be said about the battle currently going on. Despite sieging Feinster for 2 days, the Varden, which totaled 80,000 men, and the catapults they recovered after the Empire retreated after the Battle of the Burning Plains, were still unable to overcome the over 80 feet tall stone wall and mighty oak gates that, despite being rammed over and over again, barely had a dent. Through all of that, the men were peppered by arrows and stones as they attempted to breach the barrier in order to take the city. If only they had the smallest of openings, the 30,000-man army defending Feinster would have no chance. However, despite everything thrown at it, arrows, boulders, and even magic, the warded walls and gate remained impervious. Finally, Ajihad, who was now stained with the black of dirt and blood, came to Naruto, still standing back at the camp, simply watching as men threw themselves against the city in hopes of somehow breaking it down with sheer force of will. At the same time, Eragon and Saphira landed next to Ajihad as Arya sprinted to catch up to the pair, all approaching the blonde immortal who was now joined by Azura. Stopping in front of Naruto, Ajihad stood still as he simply looked at Naruto, as the screams of dying men and women rang out in the air. Eragon and Saphira similarly stopped, the two of them near spotless due to not being able to get into the thick of things without becoming pincushions. Going the last few steps, Arya strode past the trio to stand next to Naruto, snaking her hand towards his as she locked them together. Taking a glance, the newest dragon rider took in the view of her battle uniform, plain black leather armor that covered her torso, back, and up to her knees, silvery elven blade that hung at the left of her hip, and a graceful bow and quiver empty of arrows that rested on her back. Although she currently did not show any sign of emotion, Naruto could see that she was frustrated from the way her fingers were lightly tapping the emerald pommel which, softly glowed, filled to the brim with Naruto's chakra. As Ajihad flicked off some of the grime that stubbornly clung onto his face, Naruto took the opportunity to send some of his potent chakra through their hands, smiling when he saw his love stop tapping on her sword in favor of intertwining their fingers for a closer and firmer grip. Naruto, if I'm not interrupting, I have come to ask if you will be participating in the battle. I need to know if the Varden can expect your help in this. Or is 2 days of battle still not enough? Hearing the hidden tension in the question, Naruto rubbed his chin with his free hand, remembering yesterday how he responded to the same question. Flashback. After a full day's worth of sieging and getting absolutely nowhere, even with the help of the elves and Eragon, Ajihad grew worried. Oh, he was not worried about whether the Varden would emerge victorious from this battle. He knew that with a nearly fully trained dragon rider pair and over a dozen of highly experienced elven spellcasters that victory was only a matter of time. No, what he was worried was the amount of casualties that they already incurred on the first day alone, with no results. They still had several more siege battles, each one worse than this one at Feinster, and yet they were already stalled, losing hundreds of men despite their numerical and quality advantage. Any longer, and even recruitment would suffer. The potential recruits would only see an organization that threw lives away victorious. Not great for advertisement. And so, Ajihad made his way to the tent that housed the one person who could easily turn the tide of the battle with a single move. Naruto Uzumaki. May I speak to you for but a moment? Ever since Eragon told him of what happened on Doru Ariba, his respect and fear of the blonde foreigner shot up. The strength the shinobi wielded was something to be admired, but at the same time should that same power be turned against them, he feared that there would be no one remotely capable of stopping him. And so when Naruto didn't participate in the first day, he didn't ask for a reason. But now, after seeing the casualty reports after only a day, Ajihad felt he had no choice but to interrupt the immortal's peace. Flipping the covers aside, Ajihad strode in front of the meditating blonde. At the disturbance, Naruto opened his eyes, revealing a pair of piercing electric blue eyes. Before Ajihad could begin, Naruto held up a hand, stalling whatever the black leader was about to say. I know why you are here. I have felt the deaths of hundreds of soldiers and the fact you are here instead of with them, it's clear that little to no progress has been made. If Ajihad was surprised, he didn't show it. He already knew of the mysterious man's sensing abilities and that he was once the military leader of a village filled with shinobi. So, you are here to ask me for help. Silence pervaded the enclosed space as Ajihad waited for Naruto's answer. Naruto closed his eyes for several seconds as he thought back to the reason why he never used his full powers even when he had his chakra and resistance seals. Deciding to at least temporarily keep to his initial intention, Naruto shook his head in denial as Ajihad sighed. Ajihad, you know why I haven't joined the fight yet? The only reasons I fought was because it was the Varden that was being attacked and had almost zero chance of winning, and that this wasn't my fight. While I do agree that Galbatorix must be killed and his madness stopped, why should I slaughter innocent people who are just defending their home? Naruto was right, Ajihad realized. Unlike the soldiers and Urgles they fought, this time, at least from what his spies found, except for the Empire's spellcasters the rest were all men of Feinster. They did not fight for the Mad King but instead for their Lady Laranna, the just ruler of Feinster. As Ajihad struggled to find words to convince the man in front of him, Naruto sighed as he decided to give a little leeway. After all, this was the home of his friends and lover, although Kurama and he decided back when they kicked Phelan's ass that they would no longer hide their power. Those years of being Hokage wore down his brash, younger side, even if it was making a comeback. One more day. I will not participate for one more day, and should the Varden still be in the same position as they were yesterday, I will do one thing that should bring a swift end to the battle. Now go, your men are waiting for you. With that, Naruto waved Ajihad away as the leader of the Varden took the hint, nodding as he left the tent towards the rest of his officers to plan for tomorrow's attack. Flashback end. Shifting his gaze towards the besieged city, Naruto narrowed his gaze on the magically enhanced oak gates that still stood tall and almost untouched despite the punishment it took. Well, Kurama, ready for the first use of my new power outside of training? Naruto mentally questioned as the fox, who was taking one of his usual naps, woke up as an eager red eye looked out with his host's eyes. Kurama had seen the simple and in his opinion, elegant way the target was destroyed when Naruto was training in it. It was a power the giant fox didn't think he would ever grow tired of seeing. Go ahead kid, you know that power of yours never ceases to amaze me. And to think that's only the time aspect. Naruto could imagine the giant toothy grin that his furball no doubt had. Shaking his head, Naruto switched his eyes to the Rinna Sharingan, startling Ajihad but only eliciting looks of curiosity as Eragon, Saphira, and Arya looked on, wondering what new power their blonde was going to show. Pumping chakra into his right eye, the mystical eye glowed as thin purple threads of chakra seemed to leak out as Naruto focused only on the door and nothing else. Finally, Naruto whispered out, Jiken, Bunkai. The battle seemed to come to a halt as men, dwarves, Urgles, and elves alike watched in astonishment as the gates suddenly seemed to age. The vibrant brown of the oak swiftly turning to deathly black before the wood, simply withered away to ashes, and as a few more seconds passed, those ashes soon faded to nothingness. Silence reigned over the battlefield as everyone looked at the new open space where the proud gates once stood. However, it didn't last long as screams rent the air. The magicians who were supplying the chakra for the wards on the gate screamed out in pain and shock as the chakra needed to maintain the wards burned its way out of them, to no avail. The men of Feinster looked in horror as their group of spellcasters also faded into nothing, just like the gate that kept the Varden out. With a roar, the invading, or liberating to them, army rushed to the gates, pouring through as they engaged the still stunned defending troops, cutting a swath through the forces before the defenders recollected their senses. Off in the distance, Naruto closed his eyes as he switched back to his original cerulean blue before opening them, only to witness blood and gore flying as the soldiers butchered each other through what he thought was barbaric fighting. Nothing like the clean and efficient methods of the shinobi. Thank you Naruto. You saved the Varden hundreds if not thousands of unneeded casualties with, as you said, one move. The city should fall within the next few hours as their main defense and many of their spellcasters have already fallen. Naruto glanced back at Ajihad who had just finished giving his thanks and was about to leave before reaching out to grab the black leader's shoulder. Ajihad, if you are truly thankful, then do something for me. Seeing Ajihad raise an eyebrow before nodding, Naruto pressed on. Before killing them, try your best to get them to surrender. You do not want to start your campaign only to be known as a butcher of innocent men only defending their homes. Sometimes, mercy can be a more powerful weapon than any blade when wielded in the right way. Having said his piece, Naruto took his hand away as the leader of the Varden digested his words before finding that he too agreed with the blonde. There was no need for further bloodshed and like he said, no one wanted to be known as a butcher. It would be bad for recruitment. As Ajihad walked away, Eragon and Saphira nodded towards their friend before flying towards the city, now free of thousands of arrows and rocks, intent on ending the still continuing fight with the least amount of violence as possible. Only Arya remained behind as she stood by her love, looking out over the city and the smoke that started to rise as a result of secondary defenses. Turning to the man beside her, Arya asked in a lilting voice, "Love, will you be joining the battle?" She already knew of his opinions, but just in case he changed his mind, Arya asked again. "I'm sorry Arya, but this is one fight I will not join. From what I sensed, the emotions of the defenders are genuine, they are not soldiers of Galbatorix's army, just men defending their home. However, be careful when you get to the top. I feel a large amount of negative emotions gathering, just like when Durza was killed." The elf's eyes widened in horror when she heard what Naruto said. If what he said was true, then a new shade was being born even as they spoke, there was no time to waste. That thought left her mind the moment she felt the hand she held suddenly stiffen. Before she could ask, Naruto gained a grim expression before he suddenly released his hold on her hand and jumped onto Ashura's back. "Naruto, what's wrong?" Turning away from Arya, Naruto patted his partner's spiked head who by now was tense in alarm. "Prepare for your first battle Ashura." Widening his glowing eyes at the simple statement, Ashura braced his legs for takeoff as Naruto made eye contact with his companion. "Oromiz and Glade have just thrown my Hiraishin kunai. Be careful Aryaheim, but at the same time remember that even if it is a shade, know that you are ready for this fight." Arya nodded as she tightly gripped the hilt of her sword, knowing that despite her improvements, somebody that was able to force Oromiz to ask for help was beyond her and that she would only get in the way. "I won't ask you to promise to stay safe as I know you won't be able to keep it. Just come back in one piece without a sword sticking through you, alright?" Naruto just rolled his eyes at the mention of what he did before to save Eragon as he leaned down to softly kiss her forehead. Then with a wave, Naruto let out a cocky smile, "See you around, princess." As Ashura pushed off the ground and into the sky with a large boom before the two disappeared with a yellow flash. Staring at the spot where they vanished, Arya shook her head as she pushed her concerns to the back of her mind, knowing that her blonde would be fine. "For now, let's get to the top of the tower as fast I can." Despite his training, Eragon is still not ready to deal with a newly born shade, especially after fighting through thousands of men. And so, with a small amount of chakra reinforcing her legs, Arya cracked the ground as she took off in a dead sprint, whizzing past the Varden troops and into the city. Chapter 53, The Elder Generation. 30 minutes ago. The assault against Gilead was going well, as expected. Over a century had passed since the last time more than 5 or more elves left the leafy reach of the dew, Weldenvarden, causing most men to forget the might of the elder race. Sunan was an example. The city, while not the nearly the most militarized, still held a decent-sized army that were stationed just in case a stray elf or two showed. It fell in less than 2 hours. All 8,000 men of the Empire's army fell while a mere 10 of the elves were killed. This was the difference between elves and humans, one that even a century could not bridge. Gilead was different. The city was a heavily armed one with over 50,000 men and 10 catapults. Its walls were of sturdy stone and its gate made of tempered iron that were all protected by tens of spellcasters. The Varden itself would have trouble capturing the city without extreme casualties. Tens of thousands would die before the city was taken. But not the elves. With only 10,000 elves, the fortress city was nearly overrun after only a day. Oromiz and Glade were currently hovering high above the city, looking over the city that was currently aflame as Queen Islanzadi ordered her troops to raise the city that once imprisoned and tortured her only child and daughter. Once again, Alagizia is bathed in the blood of her children. Just why can't there be peace? Oromiz sorrowfully asked as more screams of agony and cries for mercy rang out. This war will only end when the traitor, the egg-breaker, the mad King Galbatorix is dead and his body at our feet. As for peace, you already know why Oromiz. No race, not even the elves, is immune to their baser desires. No matter how happy the people are, there will always be at least one person unsatisfied with his or her station in life. And just that one voice is able to cause an uprising against the ruler. Glade responded as Oromiz merely sat on the saddle, lost in thought before they heard something. Something they hadn't heard since the fall of the dragon riders. The thump as a huge volume of air was displaced. And the only species capable of such a feat. Shruken, hissed out Oromiz and Glade at the same time. Galbatorix is already here. But why? Did he somehow know of our survival? Dozens of questions ran through their connected minds, but they were all dismissed when they finally saw the traitor suddenly appear out of nowhere within the city. Their eyes widened in horror when they saw the sheer size of the dragon, no doubt through dark magic and drugs. They then watched in horror as a few of their fellow elves diverted their attention from the last 1,000 or so humans to the sworn enemy of their race. Glade, we need to get down there, now. Following the mental command, the golden dragon quickly dive-bombed from the sky in hopes of reaching the traitorous duo before they killed any of their kin. Unfortunately, they were too late in that regard. The moment those several elves laid eyes on the smirking king, it was as if the years of decorum and self-control that were drilled into them since they were born abandoned them. With reddened eyes, those elves roared out their fury as they leapt at the traitors while chanting spells like a panther with its prey. Only this prey was the most powerful man of Allegezia as well as the largest dragon alive. Humph, suicidal fools. I see that even the vaunted elves are little more than animals when they see their bitterest enemy. How amusing. Galbatorix didn't move an inch as the elves grew closer to him with their shining swords held high and the words of the ancient language on their lips. You and your reign of terror are finished, Galbatorix. Your arrogance shall be the end of you, yelled out one of the elves as a green bolt of pure magic formed in his hands, capable of instantly killing any human spellcaster with a single hit. Odd, why isn't Shuriken attacking? According to what I see, those foolish hatchlings have been in range of that accursed dragon ever since they decided to attack. Glade transmitted his misgivings to his lifelong companion who in turn frowned as they continued to speed towards Galbatorix. Their questions were answered when the Mad King shouted out a word of unspeakable power. Even to the elder dragon rider pair, who were still over a kilometer away and fast approaching, they could feel that word resound within them in all of the best and worst ways possible. What was that? Questioned the two when they watched in alarm as the magic missiles faded away into nothing. Something was wrong and so Oromiz urged Glader to fly faster towards their target, only a few hundred more feet and they could finally distract them and save their brethren. In the next instant, their faces fell when they saw Shuriken finally make his move. A massive tail, black as night with hardly a shimmer and near 400 feet in length, slammed into them, instantly turning the vengeful elves into meat paste. The golden dragon broke their dive as he hovered only a couple hundred feet, completely within range of the comparatively enormous dragon, who glared with a stare full of rage and insanity at his gleaming golden counterpart. Ah, so you two survived, Oromiz and Glade, said Galbatorix, his voice rich and smooth, like those of a benevolent king and not as if he just murdered several elves in front of them. Instead, he raised his arms as if waiting for a hug from an old friend as he continued, long have I thought that the elves might be hiding a dragon or a rider from my sight. It is gratifying to have my suspicions confirmed. Quiet, Oathbreaker! Cried out Oromiz as Glader growled out from underneath him. You have no right to speak as such after what you have done. Galbatorix chuckled, amusement dancing in his eyes as he swept his eyes over the two, noting how the two didn't seem to be as crippled as he was told. Come now, Oromi Zelda, where did the fabled courtesies of the elves go over this past century? You deserve no more courtesy than a rabid wolf. Tut tut, Oromiz. Remember what you said to me when I stood before you and the other elders, anger is a poison. You must purge it from your mind or else it will corrupt your better nature. You should heed your own advice. You cannot confuse me with your snake's tongue, Galbatorix. You are an abomination, and we shall see to it that you are eliminated, even if it costs us our lives. But why should it, Oromiz? Why should you pit yourself against me? It saddens me that you have allowed your hate to distort your wisdom, for you were wise once, Oromiz, perhaps the wisest member of our entire order. You were the first to recognize the madness eating away at my soul, and it was you who convinced the other elders to deny my request for another dragon egg. That was very wise of you, Oromiz. Futile, but wise. And somehow you managed to escape from Keelandi and Formora, even after they had broken you, and then you hid until all but one of your enemies had died. That too was wise of you, elf. A brief pause marked Galbatorix's speech. There is no need to continue fighting me. I freely admit that I committed terrible crimes in my youth, but those days are long past, and when I reflect upon the blood I have shed, it torments my conscience. Still, what would you have of me? I cannot undo my deeds and here I was simply defending myself. Now, my greatest concern is ensuring the peace and prosperity of the empire over which I find myself lord and master. Cannot you see that I have lost my thirst for vengeance? The rage that drove me for so many years has burned itself to ashes. Ask yourself this, Oromiz, who is responsible for the war that has swept across Alagaezia? Not I. The Varden were the ones who provoked this conflict. I would have been content to rule my people and leave the elves and the dwarves and the Certains to their own devices. But the Varden could not leave well enough alone. It was they who chose to steal Saphira's egg, and they who cover the earth with mountains of corpses. Not I. You were wise once before, Oromiz, and you can become wise once again. Give up your hatred and join me in Illyria. With you by my side, we can bring an end to this conflict and usher in an era of peace that will endure for 1,000 years or more. Glader was less than pleased with the speech as he gathered his flames from within his gullet before spewing a golden firestorm at the traitorous duo. Despite the impressive size of the flames, they appeared small when compared to the pure bulk of Shuriken. After several minutes, the golden dragon slammed his jaws shut, ending the stream of fire. The elves who now surrounded the two dragon riders narrowed their eyes when they saw Galbatorix and Shuriken appear out of the smoke and lingering flames completely unscathed. Oromiz and Glader merely sighed as they knew that the flames had little if any chance of actually harming the king and instead prepared for the inevitable battle. Shall I take those flames as you answer, Oromizelda? Asked Galbatorix with his rich and seductive tone, although this time there was a slight break past his whole benevolent king facade. No. Your honeyed lies cannot make us forget the atrocities that you have committed over the past century. You will find no ally within us, traitor. Now come and fight, or allow us to kill you to release your tortured soul. For Alagaezia shall be free from your insanity today. Oromiz called out with ringing tones as he drew his sword nagling, gleaming with a similar golden bronze hue as Glader's hide. You senile old fool. Snarled out Galbatorix, his voice doing a complete 180 from his previously friendly tone. If you had but accepted my offer, you could have been the first and foremost of my slaves. I shall make you regret your mindless devotion to your so-called justice. And you are wrong, Oromiz, for I have become as powerful as a god and there are none that can stop me. Now die, like your brothers. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the burning city, Shuriken pounced into the air as he left gouges as deep as rivers in the earth. Anticipating the move, Glader instantly flew upwards, away from the elven army in a more open area where he could better use his agility. Oromiz Shurtugul, come back to us. My elven spellcasters can provide invaluable aid against the Dark One. Even with your recovered strength, you cannot possibly defeat him alone. An imperious voice rang out through Oromiz's mind as one of the few beings he allowed past his barriers during the battle commanded him. Queen Islanzadi, Galbatorix is beyond any of you and should he be forced to fight against all of us, he will use the thousands of Eldenari he bent to his will against all of you. The queen gasped at the newfound information, and while angered at the deception, quickly realized that even with her numbers, it would be far from enough to even breach the Mad King's defenses. As Oromiz and Glader flew higher, Queen Islanzadi sent out one last mental message. If what you said is true, just how are you going to fight against that monster? I prefer for you to retreat while I lead our people back to the forests and wait until we have a method of dealing with the Eldenari. To Queen Islanzadi's surprise, Oromiz chuckled as he mysteriously said a few words, to fight a monster. Sometimes you need another one. Back to the present, that was 30 minutes ago. In the next half hour, Oromiz would later swear he never had a harder time just trying to survive in one piece as Galbatorix shot out spells that would have instantly killed either of them while Shuriken almost managed to swat them out of the air several times. It was only after Galbatorix taunted the two of them for running, both from their responsibilities all those years ago and now when they were flying towards the clouds, when even Oromiz, for all of his infinite patience, finally snapped as he and Glader stopped ascending in favor of diving towards the dark duo. Finally, you decided to stop running, Oromiz. I was afraid that I would have to go back and kill off a few of your elven friends. Maybe later, after the both of you are broken at my feet and Glader's heart of hearts in my hands, I'll go find your queen and throw her to my guards. Let's see how long she can hold on until her highness finally breaks. Ha 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 ha. Finally, Galbatorix let out his true nature, full of madness and insanity, as he drew his sword Vrangr, its blade as pale as a sun-bleached bone. To think you have sunk to such depths, just where did we go wrong in your training? Oromiz sorrowfully asked as Glader, despite his bulk, weaved in between the pitch-black firestorms that the pup Shuriken sent out at them. Although the flames had no chance of harming them due to the multitude of wards attached to the topaz jewel on Nagling's hilt, they still sapped the horde energy that at its peak, was able to move a mountain. Against a normal opponent, they would have ignored the flames and gone in for close combat, but against Galbatorix, who they reluctantly admitted had greater knowledge of the words of the ancient language if not its depth and at the same time possessed a far greater amount of energy they could not hope to compete with, that approach was suicide. And so, Oromiz and Glader tightly hugged against the body of Shruken who, now that he wasn't just curled up on the ground, was about 8 times the size and length of the elder dragon. Coming from behind at the larger dragon's hindquarters, Glader thrust out with his front claws as he raked down its back leg while Oromiz hacked down at the limb with his sword. Sparks flew as several scales the size of shields cracked underneath their assault. However, they had to beat a hasty retreat when a tail almost 3 times the size of Glader swept out at them as a horse would with its tail at an annoying fly. Withdrawing a fair distance, Glader and Oromiz looked back at the area they attacked, only to heavily frown when they saw the pitiful amount of damage they did with what could be considered an all-out physical attack. Slashes of about a foot deep marred the polished surface of the scales. On a dragon of the same size as them or smaller, those wounds would have been deep enough to rip muscle or even tear apart an artery and either crippling the dragon or forcing its rider to divert energy to healing the wound. However, to a dragon of Shruken's size, they mere scratches that did little but make him itch. Not even a single drop of blood leaked out despite the 12-inch deep wounds. Glader, this approach is not working. Any physical attack we unleash is far from enough and will only leave a mere scratch on Shruken's hide. Even though Galbatorix may be a traitor, he is no fool. If there are no wards to protect Shruken from physical damage, then he must have full confidence that nothing short of magic could bring his dragon down. However, we could use his arrogance against him and instead go for the weaker areas, like the wings. Oromiz, why have you not used magic on the two? Surely with your experience you could find a way around his wards, maybe enough to fatally injure either of them. Oromiz merely sighed as he told his partner a certain fear that had been growing ever since they witnessed Galbatorix easily slaughter several elves. Glader, if what I think is true, then all forms of magic will be useless against him. Remember when the several of our brethren attacked Galbatorix? A moment of mental silence passed as Glader desperately avoided Shruken's giant fangs and claws as the dark dragon grew tired of simply waiting for his golden opponent to make a move. Teeth as sharp as freshly honed swords and as long as spears ferociously snapped inches away from the elder dragon's tail as Shruken's ghostly blue eyes gazed, with unbridled rage. Claws nearly of equal size as his teeth tore away at Glader's ribs with a force that could have downed city walls, only partially deflected by the dragon's thick scaly hide. However, blood rained down onto the ground as white ribs made contact with air. Alarmed, Glader strove to create more distance as he coughed out a large amount of blood, indicating the bruised organs that were no doubt caused by the direct hit. Immediately, he felt a warmth spread throughout the injured area, soothing the pain and restoring full functionality to his movements. Oromiz, where did the wards go? How come that pup's claws were able to injure me? They should have been turned away by the wards on Nagling. Glader harshly asked as Galbatorix merely continued to look amused at the obvious confusion that ran across both of their faces. Remember what I asked before? I believe that the rumors of Galbatorix searching for the name of the ancient language were true, and that he has succeeded, as shown by the magic vanishing from the elves before and our wards fading without our knowing, even when we were still so far out. Oromiz grimly replied as Glader grew silent as he started to fully understand what his partner said. In that case, we truly have no choice. We must summon Naruto Finiral through his kunai. Loath as we are to have an outsider of the Dragon Rider Order handle our problems, this is not an opponent we can stand against alone, even after he restored us to our prime. Do it before it is too late. The eldest Dragon Rider closed his eyes for but a second as he made a swift decision. So it has truly come to this. Using the hand that was free of his blade, Oromiz reached down to the kunai that was held in place by his belt. Grabbing it, the elf was about to throw the blade when suddenly, Galbatorix muttered a word as he gripped the air with his hand. Immediately following the action, Oromiz and Glader found themselves immobile, paralyzed as their bodies refused their orders despite the amount of force and chakra they sent through them. With a twist of his hand, the two captured beings were slowly brought before the caster of the spell as Galbatorix looked contemptuously at his prizes. Amazing, isn't it? what a single word of the ancient language could when backed by the force of thousands of Eldenari. Even against a member of the Dragon Rider Council, the wisest and strongest of our order, it matters not. The Mad King gloated as he glanced at the strange blade Oromiz still held within his frozen hand. Prying it loose, Galbatorix looked over the fine craftsmanship of the blade, taking in its strange shape and the surprising weight it held despite its relatively small size. But what drew his attention were the markings on its hilt. Despite not knowing what they were, he could feel the power and potential that emanated from the strange script, and it frightened him. What are these strange characters that could cause me to fear? No, that is impossible. I am as strong as a god and there is nothing in all the land that can stop me. Not even death will take me. Waving the kunai in front of the elf's face, Galbatorix sneered. And just what is this? A secret weapon? I admit that the script on the hilt is strange, but it is nothing compared to me. But now, I must ask, just how were the two of you healed? There should have been no chance of either of you recovering, especially you Oromiz. Seeing the elf remain silent and not even try to give an answer, Galbatorix leaned forward before stabbing Oromiz through his right lung. It matters not, before you die, I will simply extract all of your memories and should that fail, I will just move on to Glader's Eldenari. Until then, let's see just how much you can truly withstand. With a sadistic gleam, the traitor uttered a spell that prevented the Elder Dragon Rider from immediately dying as he continuously stabbed with Vrangr, the Sword of Vrail, leader of the Dragon Rider Order, into the helpless elf's body, avoiding any further fatal spots while drawing as much blood and pain as possible. His pleasure only grew when he saw how Glader's usually golden eyes gained a red glow as he growled. Only when his face was nearly painted red with Oromiz's lifeblood did he stop. Twirling the kunai in his hand, Galbatorix drew it close to the elf's face as he once again taunted him. I see that over a century of pain has hardened you to its embrace. Good, breaking you will make it all the more enjoyable when I finally take all of your secrets. But for now, watch as your final hope fades. With a toss, Galbatorix tossed the tri-pronged blade over his shoulder as he looked deeply into the eyes, anticipating the despair that he had seen in so many others after seeing their final hope go down the drain. Instead, he saw only hope and amusement. As a smile fought its way onto Oromiz's face. With a snarl, Galbatorix plunged his mind into the elves in front of him, seeking to find out exactly what amused him so. Oromiz only allowed one thought to ring through his mind even as he fiercely defended his core, its obscene words shocking the king as he never thought the esteemed elf capable of such language. It was simple. You done fucked up. And then a third roar filled the night sky. Chapter 54, Battle in the Sky. I wonder what was able to force Oromiz to throw my Hiration. Although he doesn't often show it, just like the rest of the elves he's developed a superiority complex, even if it's a subtle one. Naruto thought as he transported both him and Azura to the Elder Dragon Rider in a yellow flash. The first thing they saw was white. Blinking, the two took a second to orient themselves when they realized that the white they saw were clouds. Waving his head side to side, Naruto looked for the man that summoned him, only to see more clouds thick enough that even Glade, despite being big and rather ostentatious, would be hidden from his view. Just where are you? A slight grunt behind him was all Naruto needed to pinpoint as he wheeled Azura around with his thoughts. For a second, all the two saw were more fluffy clouds. That was until Naruto noticed the hulking shadow of some massive creature that was projected against the clouds by the moon. Controlling the wind, the blonde released a gentle current that blew away the clouds, only to slightly widen his eyes. Damn, that's a big dragon. Although the two have already seen Kurama, who was literally miles larger, it was still an impressive sight. A tail larger than Gamabunta, claws as long as a tree was tall, and a wingspan that covered almost a kilometer. However, his admiration for the dragon came to a complete stop when he saw a sight that first sent hot rage then a cold calm flowing through his veins. It was Oromiz, bleeding from over a dozen stab wounds, all targeting areas to deliver maximum pain. However, after looking over them again, he quietly sighed when he realized none of them were fatal individually. It was a miracle that the elder elf was still alive, no doubt the effect of a spell, but he saw how heavily Oromiz was bleeding. 10 minutes, any longer and the mentor of Eragon would no longer be with them, and he couldn't afford that. Another stab, and he might just die right there. There was only one way to distract who he now identified as Galbatorix. Azura, give them a roar. Puffing out his chest that glowed crimson as he gathered as much air in his lungs, Azura released it all at once. And roared. As the unfamiliar roar filled the air, Galbatorix halted his torture of Oromiz and instead simply held him in midair as he glanced around with wide eyes, looking for the source of the sound. That was a dragon. Only a dragon could make such a sound. Could it be Saphira? Turning around, his eyes widened when he saw a small dragon, only about 50 feet or so in length, with metal armor as black as Shuriken, but no scales. How curious. Male, young, so it's not that brat Eragon and Saphira. I can still feel the wards in place around the egg back in your Ubane, so it cannot be that dragon. The only conclusion is that this human somehow found a stray egg, and where there is one there may be more. Only it's a pity that the dragon isn't a female. If he was, I could have had him on a breeding program to make more dragon rider slaves, thought Galbatorix as he narrowed his eyes as he gazed past the intimidating angular head with its literally blazing fiery eyes to its rider. Then he froze as he almost dropped the elf he had restrained. Naruto, lowly growled out the black-clad king, clearly recognizing the blonde human that completely thrashed his dragon rider slave. Before Galbatorix could say anything, a hard and unyielding voice pierced through the air. Galbatorix, I presume. Without waiting for a response, Naruto continued. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, as you doubtlessly already know when you peeped through Phelan's eyes. And now that we are acquainted, how about you let Oromiz and Glaider go? Asked the blonde. Azura, this is going to get ugly. This guy has far more chakra than I previously thought. The thousands of Eldenari I can see behind him seem to have bolstered his chakra pool to bijou levels, possibly to around 1 to 2 tails. Azura's glowing eyes widened at the remark, clearly remembering the mighty-tailed beasts from Naruto's memories. I see you remember them. Then you know that I might have to loosen some of my restraints and you must not be here when I do, or you'll get caught up in the collateral damage. Before Azura could respond, Galbatorix, who had recovered from the initial shock of suddenly present Dragon Rider, quickly schooled his expression as he called out in the tone he used when he tried to convince Oromiz and Glaider. Naruto. It's good to see a fellow human rider. Whatever Galbatorix was about to say was interrupted when Naruto suddenly jumped off of Azura's back. Instead of crashing to the ground, like the traitor expected, the blonde instead hovered as he used the gifts the spectral dragon granted him. Internally surprised, Galbatorix concealed his shocked expression as he continued to warmly smile, as if he wasn't holding a friend of Naruto's in midair as he bled to death. Taking the opportunity of his soon-to-be opponent's distraction, Naruto sent out one last mental command. Azura, when I grab Oromiz and free Glaider, accompany them down to the elves. They'll know what to do. However, be careful of reinforcements from the Empire. I refuse to believe it's only Galbatorix and the regular army over here. He doesn't seem like the type to go anywhere without a private division or a nasty surprise. Holding up the hand that showed his fiery Gedwei Ignatia, Naruto switched to the Rinne Sharingan as he began to utter the jutsu that would yank the elf and dragon into his grasp when he saw Galbatorix merely wave a finger as he then tried his best to convince the new Dragon Rider, despite the history they already had. I would think twice before you use any spell against me, young one. You have no clue of the amount of power I wield, and if you but join me, I can show you the true wonders of the ancient language, show you ways and words that the elves themselves have forgotten. Is that so? Naruto slightly smirked as he released some of his chakra restraints while his hand glowed like a falling star. Well, I have to say, I always loved a challenge. Bansho Tenin. Never before, in all of his testing and actual uses of the jutsu, has Naruto ever felt even a hint of resistance when he used the Deva path of the Rinnegan. But now, against Galbatorix's spell that was backed by the same amount of chakra as Matatabi, the two-tailed beast, he felt for a second as if he was playing chakra tug-of-war with Kurama again. However, the power of the Rinnegan was not to be denied, and even in his still heavily sealed state, he could already see the spell starting to unravel and tear apart as the potency of his chakra quickly overcame the bonds holding Oromiz and Glaider paralyzed in midair. With a grin, Naruto continued as he saw the trapped duo slowly move away from the enemy. On Galbatorix's end, he was panicking. The second their two spells, or what he thought was a spell, collided, he experienced the same thing Phelan did. His personal chakra reserves behind the first gate were almost completely consumed just to maintain the spell. With a slight cry, the Mad King drew on the reserves provided from his horde of Eldenari as he tried to hold on to his failing spell. Not since he tamed his first few Eldenari has he had any trouble overcoming a spell. And then when he finally broke the last of the thousands of Eldenari he hoarded, He knew that he had the ability to crush the entire elven race with a single word, even if they all united together to resist. But this insignificant dragon rider, this mere human was able to do what no race or organization was able to do, challenge and, he feared to admit to himself, overpower the spell he held over Oromiz and Glaedr. This caused the once implacable and confident king to slowly realize. He might not be the strongest in Alagaesia. At first, it was as if a stake was driven through his heart, so full of fear and terror of the unknown blonde that he unknowingly felt ever since he watched his puppet dragon rider get decimated. But such feelings were quickly washed away as he instead started to burn with rage and fury at the man who made him feel such emotions. Impossible, this is impossible. Just how are you doing this? Galbatorix narrowed his black eyes before he let out a smirk that would have caused lesser men to wet themselves in fear. Whatever, once I have you in my grasp, I will take your secrets and grow even stronger. Feel honored that I even allow you to witness the fruit of my research. Deciding to end this farce, Galbatorix whipped Vrangra up as he prepared to execute Oromiz, who was now 3 feet away, just barely within striking range, in the most brutal fashion as possible. That one motion took all the concentration as he had to divert most of his power to keeping the damned elf and dragon in place, even if he was losing that battle. Then he said it. With a few words in the beginning to cloak the word he had poured all of his energy and effort for the past 40 years into finding from the unworthy, the greatest trader of Alagaesia reverently spoke out the true name of the ancient language, the name of names, as he then slashed downward with the pale blade to bisect the elf that denied him his second dragon all those years ago. He closed his eyes, waiting to feel the warm elven blood of his foe to spray against his face, to be bathed in the life essence of the elder he once so respected but who then betrayed him. But instead, he felt nothing as his stolen blade passed without resistance through the air where Oromiz once occupied. Snapping his eyes open, he watched, confused, as the rider he tried to kill already in the arms of the blonde who then placed and secured the heavily wounded elf to the golden dragon. Faintly, he heard the youngest dragon rider command Glaedr to bring Oromiz to the elves below, who although growled and glared back at him swiftly flew back to the ground, breaking through the clouds and disappearing from sight. Good, with the elves taking care of Oromiz, he should be able to hold on until I get to him, thought Naruto as turned back to the elf's torturer. How did you do that? No magic can be used when in the presence of the true name of the ancient language. Not even I am an exception to that rule, although I'm sure with just another month or 2 of experimentation I can find a way around that annoyance. Galbatorix questioned and thought as he suddenly felt a sense of mortality that he hadn't felt since the fall of the Dragon Rider Order. Taking out the tri-pronged kunai that previously alerted him, Naruto shifted into a relaxed stance, showing no signs of his next attack would be. It was a pose that he had polished during his time as Hokage and often used in the beginning of fights to make full use of his unpredictability. With a slight start, the god of shinobi began to slowly walk in midair towards the Dark King and his near 800 feet long mount, his eyes fixed and taking in every minute twitch of both of them. Galbatorix looked back at the slowly approaching blonde with guarded eyes as the fighting instincts he hadn't used in the past 50 years rushed to life, examining every single movement for the slightest hint of a sneak attack. But to his chagrin, he found nothing. The man in front of him gave not the slightest hint of when, where, or how he was going to attack. In fact, if they weren't above the clouds, he would swear the blonde was simply taking a walk, so innocent and natural was his bearing. It unnerved him. Every fighter, swordsman, and spellcaster, no matter how terrible or elite they were, no matter what species, always showed at least a slight twitch or irregular movement when they were preparing to attack. The only profession that could instill such subtlety was, "You are an assassin, are you not?" How ironic, for a dragon, a species that prides itself on honor and valor, to choose an assassin of all beings as its rider. Galbatorix laughed, hiding his nervousness behind bravado as he mentally commanded Shuriken to attack the moment Naruto was in range. 50 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet, 4, 3, 2, 1. If I cannot hurt you with magic, then I will kill you through physical means. Shuriken! Shouted out the king as Shuriken roared, sweeping from the side a tail as large as the Manoa tree herself, except armored in scales that could take a ballista shot and come out without a scratch. Winds that could rival a small hurricane blew across the sky as the clouds scattered, leaving the stars and moon fully visible to the elves and humans below. Leaving nothing to chance, Galbatorix ordered Shuriken to keep up the assault for another 3 minutes, except this time adding his claws and flames to the mix. He refused to believe that this Naruto was fast enough in the air to dodge out of the way of the sheer area Shuriken's body took up. Nobody could be that fast. Soon the pale-eyed dragon stopped his offensive, slightly panting although it still sounded like the bellows of a forge in full swing. Scanning the area all around him, Galbatorix saw only scattered clouds and the celestial bodies that lit up the night sky, but nothing remotely eye-catching like the blonde hair and strange clothes his foe wore. However, instead of being relieved, he felt only suspicion. Such a powerful being who was not only able to fly, which he knew consumed a vast amount of energy, but was also able to, he grudgingly admitted, marginally overpower a spell he continuously poured energy into. Closing his eyes, he fortified his mind with the thousands of others as he released a mental pulse powerful enough to physically fry the brains of any living being within a radius of a kilometer except for Shuriken and him. He knew that there were several words in the ancient language that rendered the user invisible and then undetectable to all the senses, including the mind. Doing so however left the user completely vulnerable to mental attacks where even the weakest push in the right direction would grant access to his entire self. But he felt nothing. No rush of knowledge, resistance, or even memories. Just nothing. So that's your limit, Naruto. Merely a human with too much energy, but with no knowledge of how to use it. What a waste. If it were me, I would be able to unite not just Alagaezia, but even the lands beyond the sea. Come Shuriken, we might as well destroy the elves as a species while we're here. Galbatorix mocked as he gave the order of genocide without a hint of hesitation, no mercy, and not a hint of regret. But the moment Shuriken turned downwards, a cold voice spoke out behind him. And just where do you think you're going? Spinning around, the traitor looked towards the source of the voice and saw an unharmed Naruto standing a couple 100 feet away, with his strange knife still by his side. Taking advantage of the king's distraction, Naruto sprinted towards the other dragon rider as he channeled chakra to his feet in order to stick to slippery slope known as Shuriken's scaly back. Snapping out of his confused state, the king raised his blade in response to the incoming attack as he reactivated the wards that were deactivated by the true name of the ancient language from before. Once in range, Naruto stabbed out with the kunai, aiming for the vocal cord so as to stop any spells from being uttered. However, he narrowed his eyes when Galbatorix, who should by all rights be extremely wary after seeing him overcome everything with relative ease, looked completely unconcerned with the kunai coming at him at a speed greater than any elf. Is he really that confident that his defenses are strong enough to withstand anything I do despite getting shot down over and over again? However, when his kunai was still a foot away, it felt as if he stabbed into the gates of Konoha, so tough was the invisible barrier that surrounded the man in front of him. Seeing the tri-pronged blade stop in its tracks barely a foot away, Galbatorix smirked as he shifted his black eyes to the strangely designed ones that stared back with a calmness that irritated him. Even with all of your power, you cannot possibly harm me. I have spent the last century erecting barriers against all possible forms of harm, physical, mental, magical, even the very elements that shaped Alagaezia herself. In a fight of attrition, there are none that can match me. Bragged Galbatorix with a flourish of his arms as he all but declared his victory. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto burst forward in a flurry of stabs, slashes, and hacks, all targeting organs and arteries that would leave the victim either dead or quickly dying. Blurring away from sight, Naruto allowed his available chakra to flow freely as he used his considerable speed to circle around Galbatorix, expanding the area of his attacks while testing every possible angle and position and keeping his next target unpredictable. However, even after attacking enough times that would have left an unprotected man as mere minced meat, the ward blocking any blade refused to fall even after enduring hundreds of rounds. So it would seem that the wards around him do stop all attacks from blades, no matter the direction, and is completely independent of his physical reflexes. But I wonder if it would still stand if I used fists at full physical strength with my resistance seals. Naruto thought as he blurred back into sight in front of Galbatorix, resealing the kunai while donning on specially made gloves reinforced with toughness seals. Fast is what Galbatorix thought when he tried to keep his eyes on the near-invisible blonde. But when he saw the blonde stop in front of him and switch his weapon for gloves, Galbatorix tensed as he brought up Vranger in front of him. So now that you found out you cannot hurt me, what will you do? Attack me with your bare fists? Please, if even your odd blade could not touch me, you must be insane to think you could harm even one strand of my hair with your hands, scorned Galbatorix. Believing he had the upper hand after seeing him not chant or use any spells, but instead resort to more physical means of harm. Before Naruto could begin to form a response, a voice rumbled within his mindscape. So this is Galbatorix. More like a turtle than a man by the way he's relying on these wards. How boring. Hurry up and make it interesting or else I'm coming out. Naruto just rolled his eyes at Kurama, who apparently just woke up, was already demanding for entertainment, which usually translated to him beating somebody to a pulp. Alright, calm your tails, furball. This time I'm going with only my fists. That should make such an arrogant person attack back if only because of his sheer pride. Just be quick about it. With that, Naruto leapt back into the fight as he held back the full strength of his restricted self, trying to goad Galbatorix into attacking and letting his guard down. As he let out a punch to the kidney that could have shattered a boulder, it was stopped cold in its tracks 1 foot away once again. Not showing any signs of frustration or irritation of having his attack blocked again, Naruto kept up the assault as he circled around to deliver another punch to the back of the spine with similar results. Meanwhile, Galbatorix quickly grew suspicious when he felt the strength of the blows. Yes, they were powerful, but even the stronger elves were able to do the same with their natural physical gifts. But why? Why is he holding back unless? His nose flared as he glared at the spot a golden shadow appeared before quickly disappearing. He's just playing with me. Me, the most powerful man in Algesia with power equal to that of a god, and he has the gall to pull his punches? Gah! With that, Galbatorix sent a mental command to Shuriken to cease their descent and instead to fly levelly. Unhooking his legs from the tight straps that kept him secured to the saddle, Galbatorix stood up, relying on the broad back of Shuriken to provide the necessary platform for the duel he was about to start. Naruto, who was previously pounding at the frustrating barrier, stopped once again in front when he saw Galbatorix rise. A gentle breeze brushed through the hair of the two combatants who couldn't be more different in both appearance and ideals as they stared at each under the moon. One armed with a pale blade that seemed to suck in all sources of light and the other with a pair of simple-looking black gloves. Without a word, the two shot towards each other. There were no sparks, no harsh sounds, and certainly no epic speeches as the two met in a collision of blade and fist. Wanting to teach the blonde a lesson in daring to hold back against him, Galbatorix channeled the energy from the Eldenari to greatly enhance his physical strength and slashed at the clenched hand that was currently heading towards his sternum, intent on severing the offending limb. Only for Naruto to swiftly pull back his hand and instead settle for a kick to his. He didn't even bother with dodging or blocking the approaching attack, completely trusting his physical wards. After all, even if Naruto was twice as strong than he had shown, his wards were more than enough to negate that kind of power. And so instead, the king opted to continue his downward swing, aiming to cripple the arm that was still within range of his 2.5-long blade of Ranger. That was a mistake. With a grin, Naruto took advantage of the obvious opening as he used the same technique Tsunade was known for, except this time with his leg. 1 foot away, the blonde once again felt a resistance. He could see the sudden surge of energy from the Eldenari hidden in the pocket dimension behind Galbatorix going towards the ward protecting Galbatorix. However, this time, the wards that guarded against physical harm were overloaded when a force that could have leveled an entire castle wall smashed against and then right through it. The next instant was one of the worst moments of Galbatorix's life. With what felt like a full-force blow from a catapult, the strongest being in Algesia was blasted off of Shuriken's back as he then tumbled to a halt on one of the dragon's giant wings. Coughing blood, Galbatorix shot an astonished look back at the attacker who merely stood there, silently waiting for him to take his position again. As he struggled his way back to his feet, the traitor was almost sent off into the clouds when Shuriken flapped his wings. Commanding his dragon to merely hover, Galbatorix muttered a quick healing spell, softly sighing in relief as he felt his ribs knit themselves back together and his organs recover from their bruised state. Naruto grinned when he saw the king glare daggers at him before deciding to further infuriate him. Placing his left leg behind his right, the blonde brought up his right hand to make the "come hither" sign, only for his grin to grow larger when saw the bulging whites of Galbatorix's eyes as they devolved into madness and rage. "Oh, did I make you angry? Please accept my apologies then, my lord," mocked Naruto as he slightly bent his waist, further enraging Galbatorix who had by then stood up, almost frothing at the mouth at how humiliated he felt. Then Galbatorix charged. Gone was the kind, elegant, and majestic facade that the traitor had always shown to everyone. Instead, a bestial expression appeared as Galbatorix roared while releasing a powerful overhead slash at the blonde, only for it to be dodged as Naruto slipped to the side. As he slipped away, Naruto arched his eyes when his Rinne Sharingan noted the increased speed and power Galbatorix was showing as well as the increased flow of chakra from the Eldenari throughout his body. So he's able to certain extent control the distribution and flow of chakra through his body, which allows him to move far faster and hit harder than any elf. Not even Arya is as fast or powerful as him. However, weaving amongst a web of swift but wild attacks, Naruto continued to analyze his opponent. However, it would seem those years of fine dining and research have dulled his skills as a swordsman and a fighter, although his movements are slowly getting better as the fight goes on. What a pity, I can tell he was once a most skilled swordsman. Well, let's see how he handles this. Shooting out several short but brutal punches that would have taken off Galbatorix's head, had his opponent not taken a hasty step back. Clearly he remembered just how powerful the seemingly ordinary attacks were. Taking advantage of the gap between them, Naruto performed a short leap as he tightly spun in the air, adding even more momentum to the already devastating attack, while crying out Konoha Senpu. Only the battle-hardened instincts that Galbatorix was recovering saved him from decapitation or a more brutal fate as he hastily ducked under the airborne kick. Glancing up, he smirked when he saw gravity start to work as the blonde fell from the height he jumped to. "Fool, you just left yourself wide open. Die!" yelled Galbatorix as he thrust his pale blade into the heart of the still midair blonde, relying on the powerful anti-magic spells that coated the blade of Vrail and the first Eragon. The Mad King expected many things to happen at that moment, blood coating his blade, the coughs and the rattling of the blonde's last breaths as he slipped from the world, those strange eyes that he would pluck out for his own use or collection as they gleamed with an unwillingness before their light faded forever. None of this happened. Instead, his blade seemed to simply pass through Naruto as if he wasn't there. Not for the first time in those few minutes, Galbatorix froze for a split second as his mind raced through how the blonde did the impossible once again. But that short pause was more than enough for Naruto to finish the Konoha Senpu as he made himself tangible once again when the rider sword was no longer within him. Slamming his hand onto the scaled floor, Naruto lashed out with a low kick, sweeping Galbatorix off of his feet and onto his back. Following up with the attack, the god of shinobi flipped through the air as he cocked a glowing violet fist back before slamming it down at the downed king's midsection. By this time Galbatorix had recovered from his shock and kicked himself well away from the incoming downward punch, not daring to receive it or be in the range of the inevitable impact. However, the two had forgotten one thing. Had they been on the ground, the force and chakra that accompanied the blow would have merely cratered the earth and caused a massive localized earthquake. However, this wasn't the ground. No, this was the back of an 800 feet dragon that was currently gliding at height of about 20,000 feet amongst the clouds. And so when the blow landed, the direct impact alone pulverized the black as night scales directly underneath his fist into dust. But with the burst of chakra, a ripple seemed to spread thousands of scales across the broad back of Shuriken, cracked and then shattered, littering the night sky with bits and pieces of the most powerful dragon of Algesia. However, while the external damage was indeed impressive, it was the internal and hidden damage that caused Shuriken to shake the very air with his roar before a cough interrupted it as gallons of dark blood gushed between his teeth, several crushed ribs, a collapsed lung and extensive organ damage, a couple of fractured vertebrae, widespread muscle tears and bruising, and to round it all off, a dislocated wing joint. All of these injuries combined caused the seemingly invincible beast to plummet towards the ground. Although Galbatorix cared next to nothing about the dragon that fought at his side during the Dragon Rider Order downfall, he did care about the fact that he was currently falling from the same height as clouds, and even with his Eldenari at full power he wouldn't survive the crash. And so, with 2 words of the ancient language and chakra that would have done Shikaku proud, he healed the crippling injuries that prevented the giant dragon from flying. All of this happened in a few seconds, and at the end of it, Galbatorix was left panting from exertion. Despite having chakra that could be compared to Matatabi, the two-tailed bijou, the combination of having his wards being overloaded, healing himself and Shuriken, and then coursing energy throughout his muscles for more power and speed, nerves and eyes for enhanced reaction times and observation, needless to say, the Eldenari behind him were running very low on chakra. The world seemed to spin as Galbatorix fell to his knees. heavily sweating as he felt a weakness he hadn't felt since he beheaded Vrail. The moment he did so, Naruto shunshined in front of the downed king as he delivered a kick to the stomach that punted him towards one of the many spikes that lined Shuken's back. With a whoosh of air, Galbatorix wheezed out a few breaths as his grip loosened on the blade in his hand, sending it clattering against the scales in favor of using the same hand to hug his abdomen. Appearing in front of Eragon's master torturer, Naruto picked Galbatorix up by the neck and then proceeded to slam him against the spike. You know, you should consider yourself lucky. Had I really wanted to kill you, I would have instead used ninjutsu the moment I saw this big fella. Called out Naruto as he stomped on the scales beneath them. Then why, are you still here? You already freed that old fossil and his dragon, and could have returned with them. But instead, you stayed to what, humiliate me? Spat out Galbatorix as he narrowed his eyes at the cool unconcerned blue orbs, the Rinna Sharingan already deactivated, of the blonde, contemplating of whether he should attempt his final possible option that he was most known and feared for, a mental attack. Before he could even try, Naruto slammed him again against the spike. Don't even think about it. The moment you even try to touch my mind, then all bets are off, because although I may have shown you mercy, his irises turned a crimson red as his pupil narrowed into a slit, my partner won't. He will tear you and the other Eldenaris minds without a second thought, and I would rather avoid that. Now, as for why I stayed after picking up Oromiz and Glacier, it's quite simple really. I wanted to know exactly what kind of person you are, what kind of person the Varden and Elves brand as an absolute monster. And personally, the best way to figure a person out is just to fight it out with them. Naruto flipped Vranger up with his feet before grabbing the spinning blade by its hilt, admiring the pure white blade and its simple elegance before sealing it in one of his many storage seals on his body. Galbatorix saw only red at the disappearance of his blade. Other than the Eldenari in his first dragon Vranger, or first known as Eilinger, was his most prized and treasured possession. Yes, there was Shuken, yes he had hundreds of other rider blades, and yes he had an entire empire in his grasp. But none of those were even close to what the sword meant for him. Vranger was the sword of Vrail, leader and strongest of the dragon riders, and also the sword of the first dragon rider, Eragon. To him, it was a symbol that he was indeed the strongest in the land and that he had transcended the limits of Allegezia. But now he just watched the sword disappear to who knows where, and he snapped. With a rumbling growl, Galbatorix poured his entire being as well as the rest of the energy from the Eldenari, which amounted to a little more than those found on Doru Ariba, into a vicious mental attack at the man who still held him by his throat. As the king's eyes glazed over, Naruto merely sighed, deciding that he may as well rip away all of the knowledge Galbatorix had, as was part of his deal with Umaroth. He only wished that Kurama would leave the traitor sane enough to have the final fight with Eragon and Saphira. Barely a moment later, a terrified scream rent the air as foam frothed from Galbatorix's mouth and his black eyes rolled to the back of his head. Kurama, did you break him? Naruto exasperatedly asked the giant fox in his seal. No, okay, maybe a little. Naruto's sweat dropped as he expressed his slight irritation through their bond. Hey, it's not my fault if my greeting roar disintegrated him and the other flying lizards. Blame the so-called god for being so weak. Naruto just shook his head as he placed his free hand on the forehead of the now unconscious Galbatorix, his Rinna Sharingan whirring back to life as he uttered one thing. Ninjendo. That's it for part 8. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.